mid-1930s to 1949 is best described by the brother of C.S. Lewis, also a participant in this group, Warren Lewis. He said, "Properly speaking, the Inklings was neither a club nor a literary society, though it partook of the nature of both. There were no rules, officers, agendas, or formal elections." So this group of men who got together to discuss their works in progress, the name that they used came from a short-lived group a while before. It was initiated by Edward Tenier Lean in 1931, and it was for the same purpose, to read unfinished compositions. Lewis and Tolkien were part of this group, and when Lean left in 1933, they transferred the name to their own group, the Inklings. They started meeting on Thursday nights in Lewis's rooms at Magdalen College, and that's right here. It's part of Oxford University. And as they started to grow, they had to move to the Eagle and Child, which is right here. It was a pub that had a room that was fairly enclosed that they could meet in. There are many participants: J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Owen Barfield, Charles Williams, Christopher Tolkien, Warren Lewis, Roger Lancel Green, Adam Fox, Hugo Dyson, among others. One of the most well-known would be C.S. Lewis. He was known as Jack by those who knew him well. And he is right here. He wrote Mere Christianity, Chronicles of Narnia, and the autobiography, Surprised by Joy. Many of you know he was an atheist, but he became a Christian after talking with Tolkien. Tolkien was there when he became a Christian. It's funny to see, though, what Lewis thought of Tolkien at their first meeting. Because these men are known as really good friends, but he said, no harm in him, only needs a smacker. So he thought that Tolkien was too opinionated. Tolkien actually read the first few of his drafts of Lord of the Rings to this group. And he is right there. Funny thought that I saw was, he said of himself, "I'm told that I talk in shorthand and then smudge it." So obviously, it took really getting to know him to really understand what he was actually saying. His son, Christopher Tolkien, came into the picture a little bit later, and he finished some of his father's manuscripts after Tolkien died. The man that is known as the first and last Inkling was named Owen Barfield, and he's right here. He wrote poetic fiction, and him and Lewis were actually probably closer friends than Lewis and Tolkien were. Lewis considered him his second best friend, in line to his wife, Joy. He called him the best and wisest of my unofficial teachers. Lewis dedicated The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to Barfield's daughter. Another main Inkling was Charles Williams. He is right here. He joined just a few years after they started, and his literature is probably best well known next to Tolkien and Lewis. One of his books was All Hallows Eve. Lewis's brother, Warren Lewis, also participated, and in some of the things that I saw, he wasn't considered one of the main four as these were, but it was because he liked to play the background. He did not worry about his brother being younger and having the spotlight. he preferred to stay in the back and really just encourage the others on. In the 1930s, just to show kind of the friendship between Lewis and Warnie, they undertook 8 annual tours, as much as 50 miles. And he recalled with fondness later, saying, and a jolly good fun they were too. So, he and Lewis just became really good friends from their childhood. And he said, I first remember my brother Jack as a vociferous disturber of my domestic peace, and a rival claimant to my mother's attention. But during these first years, we laid the foundation of an intimate friendship that was the greatest happiness of my life, and lasted unbroken until his death 58 years later. So, and Jack describing his brother in his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, he said, though 3 years my senior, Warnie never seemed to me an elder brother. We were allies, not to say Confederates, from the very first. Another quote, just to see how other people viewed him outside of his home, was by John Wayne, one of his fellow Inklings. He said, W.H. Lewis was a man who stays in my memory as the most courteous I had ever met, not with mere politeness, but with a self-forgetful considerateness that was as instinctive to him as breathing. And there were many more quotes that I found, all of them extremely positive about just the humbleness and inviting in type of nature that he had. So these men involved in the Inklings were a group of men gathered to critique, but they were also there for fellowship. They began to know each other extremely well and really enjoyed the time that they spent together. An example is that they read the poetry of Amanda McKittrick Ross, and they would actually compete to see who could read it the longest without laughing, because they found her poetry a little bit on the ridiculous side, which from what I read, I agreed with them. So now you know a little bit of the background of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings, and just what they came from, which I think gives you a better understanding than in general. And these men certainly contributed to the literature we have now. So, any questions?